Everybody. First time that I made it to York, Pennsylvania. We've been doing programs all over Pennsylvania. In fact, our burden is even those little towns that are seldom visited. The Lord has provided a plane, a private plane, that we're actually able to go and visit those little towns, such as Derrick City. Anybody heard Derrick City? Or Carson and so forth. These are the little towns there that are close to the New York border, where you want to go out and reach to all those places. Can you put my slides? I have with me today my wife, Susan, and my two of my daughters. There's another third one that is in Andrews University. And we wrote recently a book about pandemics. I don't know if you have seen it. The book is called Pandemic Busters. And in that book, you can find everything that you need to be doing and not doing if you don't want to be a statistic. We'll be talking further this afternoon with more detail about it. You can go to the website Health Wise. Wise is in WHYS, Health Wise. And on that website, you can actually download free chapters of that book that you're able to hand out and share with others and so forth. And we have a lot of interest in that book. That book is being translated right now into 9 languages. In fact, the next language coming out is going to be Russian, followed by Chinese, followed by Finnish, and Lithuanian, Japanese, French, and many other languages are translating that book because the interest is tremendous, around the world about what can you practically do to improve your immunity. And among the different things that we have been publishing recently, there is one paper that we'll be talking about it this afternoon, so don't miss it by 2 p.m. We're talking about how hydrotherapy is one of the best things you can do to improve your immunity. We're going to learn from the Finnish people. In Finland, hydrotherapy is something very cultural. Have you ever heard about the word sauna? That's a Finnish word. So in Finland, every Finnish family has a sauna in their home. It's something cultural. They do this 2, 3 times a week. Every Finnish person does a sauna bath. And if you look at the way, for example, that coronavirus is affecting Finland, 3/4 of the deaths of COVID-19 are actually affecting foreigners in Finland. See, the citizens of Finland that have the culture of the sauna are being protected by their behavior of the sauna bath. While the foreigners, they move to the country, they do the sauna bath once a year or something, because there's some there, but it's not part of their culture, so they don't get the benefit there of stimulating their immune system and so forth. So don't miss this afternoon. We'll be talking about with more detail why this happens at the level of the immunity and other practical things we can be doing to get those beneficial effects on the immunity. And also another important factor happens to be metabolism. Metabolism has an effect on how things work. And I published a few studies on the subject, how things such as high blood pressure, things such as diabetes, things such as high cholesterol, in a matter of weeks, this thing starts to improve dramatically. In fact, in a paper that we published recently, we were showing that 93% of the people with high blood pressure medication are able to stop their blood pressure medication in a matter of 18 days. That's how fast the body starts the healing process. Once we put the right environment around us, then the body can start that healing process. And this is something that it's not like the only study there. There's multiple studies about this. We are just confirming what others have found out, that when you apply that right program, healing takes place in the body. And not only that, we know that even at the level of our thinking, that has an effect on our immunity. There's a new science by the name of neuropsychoimmunology, which means that the way that we think affects our nervous system, and our nervous system affects our immunity. And it's true, you know that very well. You have somebody that is, struggling with stress, somebody struggling in their relationships. And what happens when you don't deal correctly with those things have a negative effect at the level of your immunity. No wonder why even King Solomon, isn't it, highlighted this, that a happy heart what? It's good like a medicine, isn't it? So our emotions do play a role. So from thousands of years, the observation that was made in the Bible, today we know that is quite valid. And we know very well that it does have an effect. That's why the guideline, rejoice in the Lord always, it's actually a very good guideline. Because it has, life-giving in its effects on our immunity. And the world that we live in, sometimes the focus of the media and so forth is to make you afraid. The more afraid you are, the more you're going to watch it. So they make you more afraid. And fear is not the best emotion to have at all time. You need to have it, when there's an emergency or something. But when you are constantly in that fear mode, your stress hormones get tired of so much stress. And that continuous fear end up unbalancing things, and you end up having problems at the level of your mood and so forth, depression, anxiety, and all these things. Therefore, it's so important that we have that balance so that things can work properly. And when you have unbalance in your body, things cannot work properly. Therefore, we need to make an emphasis on having that balanced life. And that's why the program New Start is not the N program. It's not the E program. It's not the W program. But it's actually multiple behaviors that we need to incorporate for our bodies to function properly. And God always has wanted us to have that balance. And from the very beginning, when the Israelites went to Egypt and started getting, bad examples and started following bad behaviors, what God had to do, he had to go and do a re-education process. And it took him 40 years to re-educate their wrong thinking ideas that they had acquired from those Egyptians. From the, bad exercise to bad diet to bad thinking, all those things needed to be re-educated because God's plan was the best thing for them. That's the way that they were actually going to have true happiness and true fulfillment in life. And those secrets, those keys to a healthy life are actually given to us through His Word. And as we study God's Word, we learn about those healthy behaviors that God wants us to incorporate in our daily living for us to have that proper balance and so forth. So when we have that balance, our efficiency improves. And that's why we have all those written guidelines in Scripture. So let me see. Thank you for putting the screen. Let me see if we can get this one going here. I just need the control. There it is. So I'm going to be sharing with you a few things. I'll give you this from the very beginning. That top line there, ResearchGate, that's where you find my research. There's more than 140 studies published in the scientific literature there. And you can access them all for free there on that ResearchGate page. By the way, all these things are free. I'm not telling you absolutely anything. There's also a very active Twitter account, EddieRDMD. There's also a YouTube page there, dreddieramirez.com. There's multiple videos there. And if you want to come and travel with me around the world, there's that Instagram page there. So this guide, you find it on that ResearchGate page. Just go there, put Francisco Ramirez ResearchGate, you'll get to that page, and you can download this free guide. This guide was written together with Dr. C. Holt. Dr. C. Holt, his YouTube channel has more than 1 million subscribers. And I wanted to show you, not this one, we have, let's see if you guys can help me here. Let's see. Can you help me with the next one? Let's see. Yeah, this is the article that we're going to be talking about this afternoon. So we'll be talking a little bit more detail, the why. What's the science behind the effectiveness of hydrotherapy? This is the book, Pandemic Busters. You can also go to that website, pandemicbusters.org, for more information. And it's going to be coming up into multiple languages very soon. So there's people that ask the question, where did this problem come from? It's interesting that in Matthew 24, we find some interesting guidelines. It tells us a little bit about what things were going to happen at the end of things. And notice some of those things: for nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. Is that happening today? You just open the newspaper, isn't it? And there's this one that is about to fight against this other one, and this other one that is already fighting, and this other one that just finished fighting. And over we find that pattern. There shall be famines. In 2022, is there famines in this planet? Absolutely. This is from the United Nations. It says that there are 20 hunger spots around the world. There are people that are literally lacking food. In fact, I've been personally to a few of those places. There shall be earthquakes in diverse places. Any earthquakes recently? Interesting comparison. If you check from 1900s to 1910, there were 3 earthquakes 6.0 and higher worldwide, okay, in a matter of 10 years. If you take the year 1990 to the year 2000, there has been 943 earthquakes worldwide, 6.0 and higher. Little difference. Huge difference, isn't it? And that is what we are witnessing. And it is, as you read that chapter in Matthew, what we understand of what's happening. It is like a woman that is about to give birth. And if you ever been in the delivery department, you will see that the baby is coming with the doctor or in spite of the doctor. A baby is coming out. And those contractions are going to get more intense and faster until the baby is born. That is what we're witnessing. This world we're seeing, it has some major contractions, and we're seeing those contractions more often and more powerful in front of our own eyes. And there shall be pestilences. Any pestilences recently? Well, we have one, isn't it, that literally froze this planet. Acts of the Apostles, page 26. There are in the world today many who close their eyes to the evidences that Christ has given to warn men of his coming. They seek to quiet all apprehension, while at the same time the signs of the ends are rapidly fulfilling. And the world is hastening to the time when the Son of Man shall be revealed in the clouds of heaven. And we know that one of the main threats of humanity are something that we're going to be learning about them today that are called the group of disease emerging infectious diseases. Emerging infectious diseases. And if you were surprised about COVID-19, wait till we get the next one. We're waiting for another pandemic. That pandemic, it's going to be called the Pandemic Influenza. And think about the infectiousness of COVID-19, but a mortality of 30-40%. And we'll be talking today, where is this emerging disease going to be coming from? Now, just to give you an example of one of these emerging diseases, think about 1981. When Ronald Reagan was president, so in your head you can pinpoint, when in time that happened. Back in 1981, there is this report that is put out on a regular basis when there is a new disease or there is some important new epidemic, a new report is coming out. And in that report in 1981, they were reporting that there was a small group of homosexual males in Los Angeles that had a weird type of pneumonia. See, pneumonia is something that as a doctor we see often. But this pneumonia was not the common pneumonia that we usually see. Did you know that this was the very first time in 1981 when they reported what has become today AIDS? That was the humble beginnings, just a small number of people, and today 36 million people have died as a result of that AIDS tremendous problem worldwide. And yes, sexual promiscuity and so forth has spread this thing all over the place. But the question is, where did it come from in the first place? We're going to be learning about that today. And there are many other of those emerging infectious diseases. HIV, as we saw that, West Nile virus, Lyme disease, Ebola, COVID-19, all these are part of that emerging infectious diseases. One of the tools that we have to help us with answering that question is something called medical anthropology. Medical anthropology studies the diseases and helps us to understand where that particular disease came from. So, to give you an example, smallpox. Where did smallpox come from? Smallpox came from camelpox, and humans being in close contact with the camel, the camelpox jumped into the humans, then later on it changed into a human pox, and that's how we got smallpox in the first place. Whooping cough, a tremendously infectious disease, thanks to public health interventions such as vaccination. We don't see that very often here, even though there's still some around, but there's many countries that still struggle with whooping cough. It is a cough so severe you even get purple because you cannot even breathe of how severe that cough is. Where did it come from? It came from the close contact of humans with pigs. This is a disease that naturally is with pigs. There's a reason why God said, don't even touch the pig, isn't it? Don't even get close to it. God wanted us to avoid this type of problems. But by violating those principles, we get ourselves in trouble. Another interesting source of disease, especially in the American continent, was brought by the Europeans as they moved from Europe to this new world. Many new diseases that the natives have never been exposed to, they started being exposed to those diseases. And in fact, if you check the statistics, just in a matter of 40, 50 years after the first contact of the Europeans with those natives here in this continent, half of the population already have died because of those diseases that their immune system was not used to. The Europeans were used to those diseases, but not the natives here, and that created tremendous mortality. In fact, a few years later, for example, the Indians in Mexico, the Aztecs, had reduced their population by 10%. 10% only remained from the 100% that were there when the original natives got in contact with those Europeans. So where did that come from? Well, we're going to learn about that today. Typhoid fever, a big problem worldwide. Did you know that every chicken has typhoid? Typhoid is a bacteria that naturally inhabits the intestine of the chickens. And due to industrial processing, you get all these chickens, you infect everything that is touching them. In fact, most of the eggs, when you grab the egg also has typhoid. So that disease came from the contact of humans with chickens. And then human measles. That one, a tremendous killer worldwide. More than 200 million people have died because of that. It came from the close contact of cows and sheep with humans. And influenza, that disease that comes on a regular basis worldwide. Influenza came from close contact of humans and ducks. Now think about it. You think that the duck that is flying there in the sky is the one that infected the humans. No, isn't it? You had to have it here next to your face. You had to domesticate that animal so that you can get really close to it, and then the dog could, sneeze or something, and then it could infect you. So you have to have domestication of this animal for that infection to take place. Leprosy. Leprosy comes from two possible routes. One is the water buffalo. Close contact of the water buffalo and the human made the disease to jump into humans. And second, armadillos. Armadillos naturally have leprosy. Don't touch armadillos. Leave them alone. They're in the classification there in Leviticus, of animals that you shouldn't even touch. Let those armadillos by themselves. And the common cold. Did you know that the common cold came with close contact of humans and horses? That's the way that the common cold that pretty much all of us have suffered at some period of our lives actually came into the humans. There's an excellent resource if you're interested in the topic. This book by Jared Diamond, Guns, Germs, and Steel, talks with detail about this process of those diseases jumping. And it's fascinating. Jared Diamond explains how at the arrival of the Europeans, they actually wiped out 95% of the natives in this American continent. But it was funny that it was not the other way around. The Europeans were not getting disease of the diseases of the natives, but rather it was the Europeans bringing disease to these natives. Why did that happen? And that had to do by the fact that there were no plagues here in the American continent. Why there were no plagues in the American continent? Because the natives here in the American continent didn't have animal husbandry. See, they used to eat buffalo, but they didn't have a herd of buffalo there, next to their homes. They would go and hunt one of them, eat it, it will be over, and then they will have to go and do that over and over. While the Europeans did have animal husbandry. In this chapter, Little Gift of Livestock, he explains with quite detail how that process is. And there was no pigs. So you know that the Europeans brought here to the American continent the pigs, the chickens, the goats, the horses. Those animals didn't exist in the American continent. It was the Europeans that brought them here. So there was no chicken, no typhoid fever, no pigs, no whooping cough. While if you go and look into the history of the Europeans, you would see that the Europeans would get hit over and over by tremendous epidemics on a regular basis. In fact, here's some little sample of some of those plagues that were being affected. The Justinian plague, 10,000 people were dying per day. The Black Death, half of the population of Europe disappeared. Italian plague, 1/3. There was the Republic of Venice, 1/3 of the people there died. The Great Plague of London, 8,000 per week. The Great Plague of Marseille in France, 100,000. And you could see, on a regular basis, the Europeans were being affected over and over by disease. And when we got to the 20th century, we thought that we had infectious diseases under control. With the advent of antibiotics, with the advent of hygiene, with the advent of vaccines, the number of infectious diseases started to decrease dramatically. In fact, in the 1950s and in the 1960s, things started to change. And virologists such as Mark Fern says, it's almost to write something that has passed into history, talking about infectious diseases. Or the Surgeon General, the war against infectious diseases has been won. But something happened. See, we had a lot of infectious diseases, and then the numbers started decreasing dramatically until around the 1950s, the 1960s. Then we started seeing an increase of those infectious emerging diseases. So let me tell you this short story. When I grew up in Mexico, and when I was in my 20s, I moved to the country of Norway. I speak Norwegian because I lived there for many years. My first daughter was born in Norway. And when I got to Norway, I realized that Norway was very different from Mexico. Not only weather-wise, it's a totally different weather there, but things work very differently there. Things are very functional. The wealth is distributed very, equally among everybody. Criminality is very low, and so forth. So I ask my question: what made this country so prosperous? So what I did, I went to the library to read the history of Norway, and I got shocked. As I'm reading the history of Norway, did you know that Norway was also a very dysfunctional country? There was a lot of abuse. The power was very used in a very bad way. So there was a lot of abuse among the poor people and so forth. And something arrived to Norway that didn't come to Mexico. And that was the message of Martin Luther. When the message of Martin Luther comes to Norway, it changed the way that the Norwegians were thinking. And it created a transformation of the whole country when these people embraced that message of Protestantism. In fact, now I had the opportunity of speaking all over the world. I've been to 85 countries. And you can see the pattern very clearly. The countries that embraced that message became, in today's world, the most prosperous countries on planet Earth. And you have Canada, United States, you have England, you have Norway, Sweden, Finland, Denmark, Holland, Switzerland, Germany. These are the countries that people risk their lives to move into. You have colonies from them. For example, in Asia, you have a colony from England, Singapore, tremendously prosperous country. And then you had Hong Kong, and then you had South Korea, the country with the highest number of Protestants in all Asia. And then you have the colony of Australia. Then you have New Zealand, tremendously prosperous countries. Now, sadly, many of those countries, the prosperity that God gave them, they started forgetting about the roots of their success. And many of those countries are turning their backs, and they are forgetting the source of their success and prosperity. For example, in New Zealand, today, 1/4 of every single young people in New Zealand feels very lonely. And when you see who is the people that don't believe in God, don't have any religious affiliation whatsoever, you will see that's exactly that population range. And we know that that is causing problems even at the level of the mental health. You show me the most secular countries on earth, I'm going to show you the highest suicidal rates in the world. So you have different diseases from different animals that are never together, and now the disease is able to jump and infect secondary to that. So, as you can see, these types of problems, we can prevent them. Now, in America, we don't have wet markets. In America, usually people don't eat monkey, and that's good. But we have this. This is the perfect place for this pandemic influenza to come from. Think about it. You have all these chickens in an unnatural number. This is not the way that God made chickens to be. No ventilation, no sunlight, under constant stress, feeding them all this artificial stuff, feeding them all these medications and things. Man, this is the perfect environment for viruses to mutate. And that pandemic influenza I told you that we're going to be seeing, that is called an avian flu. It's going to come from these places. And you know, we're just waiting for the right mutation. It's like Las Vegas. You know that game that they play in Las Vegas? They pull that lever there and then the 7777 gets there. We're waiting for the perfect mutation sometime in the near future. We don't know when. Unless we stop this type of behavior, we are going to get ourselves in really big trouble. And there's many other new diseases like this one, Streptococcus suis. This one came from pig farming. Look at this disease. It makes you blind. It gives you an infection in your nervous system. It is a tremendously harmful disease. And where does this Streptococcus suis came from? Well, it came from farming of pigs. Stress due to poor housing conditions such as overcrowding and inadequate ventilation are risk factors for the development of the clinical apparent disease of Streptococcus suis. And you know, there are pigs that spend their whole life like this. They don't allow them to do exercise. Why they don't allow to do this pigs exercise? Because if they do exercise, the meat becomes hard. And who wants hard meat, isn't it? You want to, put your fork, and so the fork can go in. So they have these poor pigs not even being able to lay down comfortably so that they can have that soft meat. Or this other emerging disease called the Nipah virus, tremendously dangerous virus. Between 40 to 70% of the people infected are going to die of this disease. Very infectious. In fact, they're afraid that it can be used, as bioterrorism and, spread it out all over the place. Where did it come from? Look at the official report. Without these large, intensively managed pig farms in Malaysia, it would have been extremely difficult for the virus to emerge. So when you have all these pigs all together, that is the perfect place for these new diseases to come from. So our behaviors can make us more vulnerable. Look at this very interesting study. It was a study that cost $1 million. And what they did, they took samples, anal swabs, so that they could understand who had antibiotic resistance. And look at the results. They found out that people that were not vegetarian, pretty much every single one of them had antibiotic resistance. Because the animals that you're eating, they have been exposed to antibiotics, and therefore you yourself end up acquiring that antibiotic resistance. But checking the study, on the right side, every single one of those vegetarians, nobody had that antibiotic resistance. So even our behaviors are making us more vulnerable to some of those new diseases. No wonder why Councils of Diet says, the life that God has given me is that the curse of God is on the earth, the sea, the cattle, on the animals. There soon will be no safety in the possession of flocks or herds. The earth is decaying under what? The curse of God. So, in closing, let's put it in perspective. COVID has killed millions. AIDS also has killed millions. Thousands have been infected by that Streptococcus suis. And SARS-1, we're in SARS-2, but SARS-1 killed thousands. And Nipah already killed hundreds. But this new influenza is going to be a disaster worldwide unless we change our behaviors. So, the light given me is that it will not be very long before we shall have to give up any animal product. Even milk will have to be discarded. Disease is accumulating rapidly. The curse of God is upon the earth because why? Man has cursed. And that's what we are sadly seeing in front of our eyes. How the morality of this world is going downhill every single day. And we have a special mission that we need to fulfill. And even when things are looking difficult, still God is in control. In closing, remember the story when the disciples were in that boat ride in which they thought that they were not going to make it. Meanwhile, Jesus was sleeping there, as if nothing. And the disciples, all stressed out, called unto Jesus. And what happened? Jesus calmed the storm. For Jesus, that was not stressful. He had the control in his hands. And in the same way, even though this world looks like it's going the wrong direction, still God is in control. And that's why God has given us the promise in 2 Timothy 1:7, for God had not given us a spirit of fear, but of what? Power and of love and on a sound mind. So may we ride the tempest together with Jesus, because outside of Jesus, I don't see any hope. So may we be able to team up with Him. May we be able to fulfill that mission that God has for every single one of our lives as we team up together with Him and follow His will. May God bless you, and we'll see you this afternoon at 2 p.m., so don't miss it. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to the afternoon program. So today we're going to talk about the practical side of things. What evidence base there is of things that we can practically do to improve our immunity. And it doesn't matter if you're vaccinated or not vaccinated. You can still be vaccinated. And if the habits are not the best, you still are at risk for significant disease. I'm going to be quoting quite a bit of some of the research I've done. You access that research by going there to that page. Francisco Ramirez ResearchGate on Google will take you to that ResearchGate page. And also an active Twitter account, Eddie RDMD. And so does the YouTube page, Dr. EddieRamirez.com. And as I mentioned in the morning, all these things are free. I'm not selling you absolutely anything in those pages. The goal is for you to be motivated into doing some positive lifestyle changes. Let me show you some things that I put on my Twitter account. For example, this interesting study from the journal JAMA, one of the top journals in the world, about if you don't do exercise, it's worse for you than smoking, diabetes, and heart disease. That's how important it is to do exercise. And this is something that we need to, make it into our normal lifestyle. I know that some people say, "But doctor, it's winter, and it's cold in Pennsylvania." Yes, I know. I used to live in Norway. It's the same story. And in Norway, they have a saying that says, "There's not such thing as bad weather, there's bad clothes." Okay? So what we need to dress accordingly and go out. My daughter was born in Norway, our first daughter. He was born in January 11, in the middle of the winter. And I remember that, after a couple of days after she was born, we were out walking with her. Of course, you cover her well and coat and so forth. But it is possible to do exercise even in situations like here. And this one, 2 very important universities doing this study showing that exercise makes you more happy than money. So here's the person, killing themselves, trying to make more money, while what they need to get themselves some nice tennis shoes, and that'll make you more happy than the money. New England Journal of Medicine, how cow's milk is a non-essential nutrient. It's not like you have to have it. That's what the marketing department of the dairy industry tells you, but that's not the reality. In fact, minorities have problems digesting cow's milk. Many people have issues with skin problems, digestive problems, anemias, and all kinds of problems secondary to consumption of dairy. This is a very interesting study. This is the oldest living male. And they asked him, "What is your secret?" He said, 2 secrets. Number 1, always smile. Number 2, don't get angry. Okay? When you get angry, you generate the oxygen-free radicals, and that actually ages you. That's why you need to keep your emotions under control. It's not good to be angry as you generate those oxygen-free radicals. And this last one, in this study, was shown that having a plant next to your desk actually has a stress-lowering effect. Maybe because you're changing your focus, you're putting your attention to it, trying to take care of it, and so forth. So that's something, practical that people can do. So those are the type of things I put on that Twitter account. So by reading those type of things, it motivates you, isn't it, to do those positive lifestyle changes. So let us talk about this famous coronavirus. So the reason why this virus is so contagious is the following. See, we have what are called the RNA viruses, and we have what are called the DNA viruses. This one is an RNA. But there are some viruses in which the genetic code is backwards. So in order to infect you, you need to flip the genetic code, and then it can infect you. Those types of viruses happen to be less infectious because they have this negative sense. Coronavirus has a positive sense, which means that as soon as it gets there, it can be infectious. No need to flip code or anything. And one of the vulnerable places that this coronavirus happens to be around itself. It is made out of fat, out of lipids. What do you have at home that dissolves lipids? What do you do with your plates when they're all dirty? Good old soap. Okay? Good old soap, what they do, it removes the bonds of the lipid. That's why you're able to use it when your plates are greasy and so forth. Same happens with coronavirus. So good old soap inactivates that lipid layer, inactivating the virus. And to understand what can we do about it, we need to understand a little bit how it functions. So the virus is surrounded by these spikes that are called the spike proteins. That's the reason why, in fact, it gets its name coronavirus. Corona in Latin means crown. So when you look at this virus with an electronic microscope, it looks like it has a crown because of those spike proteins. So those spike proteins is what connects to your body. You have these receptors in your body, and that activates the virus, and it literally downloads its genetic code into your body. In fact, where a virus connects to the body usually is where its effects are going to be. Like the common cold usually tends to connect more on the nose side of things. And that's why the symptoms of the common cold are more bothersome in that area. You feel your scratchy nose and you sneeze and runny nose and so forth. Coronavirus has been going through many different changes, but the majority of the coronavirus happens to infect a little bit lower than the common cold. And that's why the symptoms sometimes are reflected to that. And those receptors, the ACE2 receptors, that's where the virus connects, it downloads that code, and then your own cells become factories of coronavirus. It takes over the protein-making mechanisms of the cell, and the body starts packaging coronaviruses. And when you cough or sneeze and so forth, then you're releasing those coronaviruses outside. And usually the disease goes something like this. So you have, at some period, you met some of that coronavirus, and then usually about 5 days or so, that's when the symptoms starts to occur. And then usually in a matter of a week, things are either going to start getting better or things are going to start getting worse. If things are getting worse and the symptomatology starts becoming worse and worse, that's when the people is going to show up at the hospital. So the progression of the disease is something like this. 80% of the people, usually their immune system is able to deal with the virus. You may be severely sick, you may be in bed, for some days, but only 20% of those 100% people that met the virus are the ones that are going to become so severe, the disease, that they're going to end up in the hospital. And sadly, a sub of them, those are the ones that will continue to get worse, are going to end up in the ICU. And sadly, a sub percentage of that are the ones that are going to die. So the name of the game is to try to move these percentages so that more people are part of these statistics instead of being part of that 20%. Now, when we learn how the immune system works, you're going to learn that there's two big divisions in your immune system. You have what is called the innate immune system. As its name says, innate, that's the one you're born with. And this immune system, as you age, it actually gets itself weaker. And that's why, regarding coronavirus, children is not our biggest worry. Because children happen to have a nice and strong innate immune system. It's only the children that have other conditions. Children that has cancer, children that has diabetes and so forth. Those are the ones that worry us. But the average healthy child is not that problematic. The problem is the people that have this innate immune system that gets weaker with age. Now, the second part of the immune system is called the adaptive immune system. And it's called the adaptive because as it meets different new bacteria and virus and so forth, it learns how to deal with those things and it adapts. That's the reason why it's called like that. And it is said that it gets stronger with age because the older you live, the more bugs you're going to meet throughout your life. And your immune system will know how to deal with the different diseases and pathologies and so forth. So one of the most important parts regarding coronavirus is this innate immune system. And another very important key player regarding immunity is something called the interferons. As its name says, they interfere with the viruses. So interferons are actually predictive of how severe somebody is going to have the disease. And I'll tell you in a minute what we can do to improve those interferons. This is a very interesting study. And notice what it says here. These facts strongly indicate that which one? The innate immune response is a critical factor for disease outcome. In other words, people that have weaker innate immune systems are at higher risk for severe disease. And notice this other study about the type 1 interference. It says that the higher loads means there's more copies of the virus, and delay interferon responses, those make the patients more susceptible to severe disease because they cannot mount an effective antiviral immune response. Type 1 and type 2 interferon were the highest in those patients that end up with mild to moderate coronavirus disease. And those interferons were lower in those patients that end up with severe and critical disease. So can we see where this is going? It means that I need to do things to stimulate those interferons as high as possible, because the level of interference is what determines how severe you end up with the disease. Patients with more severe disease had less type 1 interferon activity in their blood. So, as we can see, those interferons and the innate immune system are predictors of how severe the disease is. In fact, you may have probably heard of people that end up with coronavirus and end up with severe disease, and sometimes even the internal organs get damaged secondary to that. Have you seen that? And that happens to occur. Here's an example of a lung. You see these white spots there? They shouldn't be there. It means that the immune system started attacking their own body. Why did that happen? This happened on people with weak immune systems Because they didn't have enough interference, it meant the disease multiplied much more, and it comes to a point in which the immune system just goes crazy and starts being overactive too late. And those are the people that end up with the severe type of damage. So as you can see, we need to learn how to become more part of this 80% and less of that 20%. So let's go and see some practical things we can do that are evidence-based. In the book of Pandemic Busters, I've seen some copies around here, I talk about 22 things you can do. By the way, the book is available in Kindle format, in physical format, in Audible. If you want to listen to it, it's also available there on Audible. And there's even samples of free chapters. Just go to healthwise.store, and you can go to free downloads, and you can actually download free chapters and share them with your friends or whoever you want to. The idea is to, spread the good news about this. And for the record, I don't make a single penny out of this book, even though I wrote it. 100% goes to the Adventist Whole Health Network in order to continue with its mission and ministry in Pennsylvania. And also this guide that I mentioned to you in the morning, you find it there on that ResearchGate page. This is a practical guide focusing more on the nutritional aspects of things. There's a few more things, but the book is more thorough because it talks about the whole aspect of the whole human. So first thing, we need to make sure our vitamin Ds are nice and normal, the levels. And the problem is that if you live in Pennsylvania, you are at high risk for low vitamin D. It actually reminds me of the situation in Norway. In Norway, this was also a big problem. And in Norway, the government had an excellent public health guideline that said the following. If the month has the letter R, you probably need some vitamin D. January, February, March, April, and then the sun comes. May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December. So remember that, okay? If the month has the letter R, most probably you do need some supplement, unless you happen to be a snowbird, and spend your winters in the Virgin Islands or somewhere there. There you get some nice sunlight down there, or Florida, or Texas. But here in Pennsylvania, unfortunately, in the winter, due to the angle of the sun, is just not enough sunlight for your skin to generate vitamin D. And this is something that has been documented in multiple studies, how those levels of vitamin D in some studies show some predictiveness of how severe the disease was going to be. So make sure you get into that habit. And if you don't have a clue where your vitamin D is, ask your doctor. See, clinically speaking, as a doctor, I cannot see you and tell you, oh, you probably have low vitamin D. I cannot, I need a laboratory. I need a blood sample, and that's the one that is going to tell us where we are. Because if your vitamin D is too low, you may need the prescription strength vitamin D. And that's why that's a conversation that you need to have with your doctor. Ask him, it's a good idea to know where your vitamin D is located. It's not only for immunity, but there's many other aspects that are dependent on that vitamin D. Another thing that we need to watch out are comorbidities, are other diseases that when coronavirus comes and somebody that has those conditions, you increase the risk of severe disease. things like obesity, depression, and so forth. This is my study. And this is one of our patients that came to the New Start program in Weimar, California. Classic patient that comes to us. Patient had a problem with his weight. He had 381 pounds. He had problems with high blood pressure. Even though he was taking 2 medications for blood pressure, still his blood pressure was too high. And he was a diabetic for many years. He was taking 1 medication for his diabetes. In a matter of 18 days, that's how fast things start getting better. In a matter of 18 days, he was able to lose 16 pounds. We had to stop his blood pressure medication. Not because we were irresponsible, but because his blood pressure started tanking down. So we had to stop the blood pressure medication. His fasting glucose started improving to the point that we had to stop his glucose medication. And the good news is that he didn't say, oh, I got better, I'm going to go back to the way I was living. No. He learned his lesson well, and from now on, he continued following that whole food, plant-based diet. And in a matter of 6 months, he already had lost 83 pounds. Still, as he went back to his physician, there was no need to put him back on his blood pressure medication or diabetes medication. He continues doing those changes, and in a matter of 11 months after he had started doing those changes, notice his blood pressure is perfect. That's where we want the blood pressure medication without taking blood pressure medication. His cholesterol, perfect. Your goal for cholesterol should be 150 or under. There's many heart attacks that happen on people with cholesterol 170 and so forth. So your goal should be 150. And the bad cholesterol, the LDL, your goal should be 75 or under. That's a cholesterol that happens to get stuck to your arteries, increasing your risk of heart disease. And the most surprising number we see here is this one, what we call the hemoglobin A1c. On somebody that is considered diabetic, that is not taking anything, any medication for diabetes, it means he is no longer diabetic. His diabetes reverse. Now, this is not something that I can tell you, oh, I've seen this every 10 years. No, you see this quite often at the lifestyle center when people go and start dealing with the root cause of their problem. And you can see here, in a matter of a year and a half, after losing 141 pounds, you can see no longer obese, no longer diabetic, no longer hypertensive. This is what you can experience as we are making those positive lifestyle changes. And this is a study that I mentioned in the morning, how we follow up patients for all the patients in the lifestyle program for 1 year. And we were showing here that 93% of the patients that have high blood pressure and that are taking blood pressure medication, the majority of them are able to stop their blood pressure medication by the end of the program. Secondary, that the blood pressure starts to improve quite fast. And this other one, I'm in the process of publishing this clinical case. This patient came to us. He had problems with allergies, he had problems with diabetes, he had problems with depression, he had problems with high blood pressure, and he was taking this bag full of medication every single day. And we started doing the mathematics. We helped this patient in a matter of a month and a half to stop all those medications, and we did the mathematics. This patient is saving 50 $53,800 a year of medication that he no longer needs to take. Is that good news or bad news? I mean, that's the down payment, isn't it, for your next home or your new car, okay? There it is, you know. So this is exactly what you can experience, you know, when you start making those positive lifestyle changes. And this other one, this is my patients, and we were showing in this study how cholesterol starts coming down in 2 weeks. Okay, that's how fast. As you start making those dietary changes, stop the caffeine, start doing the exercise, start going to bed early, and all those healthy behaviors, cholesterol starts coming down. In fact, the majority of the patients in the study, we had to stop their statins, you know, the medication to lower cholesterol, because their cholesterol started to come down to normal levels. And this other one, it's another one of my studies. We're showing the power of the whole food plant-based diet to help you lose weight without suffering. See, there's many ways of losing weight. There's some that are very restrictive, you know. Here you're eating these little plates of food, you know, and you're like hungry, you know, the whole day, you know. I mean, how long can you do that, you know? Man, after 2 weeks you say, you know what, forget it, I'm not following this. And you end up worse than where you started. Not so with whole food plant-based diet. You're eating enough, you're feeling satisfied, and your body starts shedding those extra pounds. And what we're showing in this study is the beauty of that method, that if you have obesity or you're overweight, you will lose weight on that diet. But if you're normal weight or you're underweight, you won't lose weight on that diet. In other words, once you come down to your normal weight, you'll stabilize there, which is the beauty of this diet. And this other study showing how females that are going through the process of menopause, sometimes they were nice and healthy, but as they come to that change of life, that's when things start getting a little bit, you know, out of control. The blood pressure starts going up, the fasting glucose starts going up, and we're showing that those females benefit from those lifestyle changes as their cholesterol starts coming down, as their blood pressure starts coming down, as their fasting glucose starts coming down, secondary to making those positive changes. And this other one, I worked for Dr. Neil Nedley for many years, and we're showing here that the majority of the patients with depression, as they deal with the root causes of their depression, the depression will be reversed. And in the paper, you can find it there on that ResearchGate page. You can download it there for free. We're showing there that these are the main causes of depression. So the name of the game is to identify them and make those changes in order for the mental health to improve. The reason why there's so many mental health issues, depression and so forth, is because of the way that people live today. Just look around and see, you know, no exercise program, diet that is horrible, addictions, not controlling their thinking, not going to bed on time, and it's just one after another, after another, after another. And when you put them all those things together, the brain cannot function properly. So we need to go back and start asking that question, what may be causing the problem, and reversing them. In our program, 95% of the patients that are able to identify those things and make those changes are able to regain their mental health. And you can see this is our classic patients that come to us. They come with very severe type of depression, and by the end of the program, The mental health has improved dramatically as you deal with the root causes of the problem, not only depression, but also anxiety. So there is definitely hope for reversing these things. And this very interesting study from England, it was showing about the effect of eucalyptus oil. And it's so interesting, this study. Look at what it says. Overall, our data demonstrating that eucalyptus essential oil from this tree is able to implement which immune system here? The innate immune system. And this is something documented not only on one study, but multiple studies. And one of the things that you can do, you can use things like essential oil. Don't take it internally, okay? It can be poisonous. I'm not saying to go and take this thing. What you do, a couple of those drops of oil, you can put boiling water, and in that way you diffuse that. And another thing you can do, I actually have a whole chapter on my book, is something that is called forest bathing. This is a very common Japanese practice. Here in America, it sounds kind of strange, but in Japan, it's something that is something very cultural. And it was been shown in studies that doing exercise in places where there is pine tree or eucalyptus tree, by doing exercise in that type of setting, you actually stimulate your immune system. This is one of those studies, how forest bathing enhances the natural killer activity and expression of anti-cancer proteins. So not only immunity-wise, but also decreasing the risk for cancer. And the more you do it, the better the activity of the immune cells, which is what? Very good news, isn't it? As you start doing this. And this is not something that you need to do every day. As you can see, you can do once or twice a week, and then the benefits carry over through many days. Another thing that we need to be doing is sleeping enough. And sometimes this is something that we tend to compromise. Too many things to do and so forth. And here we are, late at night and so forth. But our immune systems are dependent on sleep. You need to make sure you're logging in at least 7 hours of sleep. And one of the most important parts of your sleep cycle happens to occur at early in the night. So when you're going to bed too late, your system doesn't rest as much as somebody that goes to sleep early in the evening. See, our ancestors used to go to bed very early because the majority of our ancestors used to work in agriculture. So they knew very well that if you end up working too late, it was too much sun. So they would get up as early as possible so they could avoid, the heat of the day as much as possible. But today, we have so many interesting things to do, isn't it? Television, to Netflix, to cell phones, to tablets, and all kinds of things that try to keep us up and awake. Don't, put too much competition, Put priority on your sleep. And another thing that you can do to improve those interference and stimulate your immune system is using hydrotherapy. In this study, what they were doing, they were putting volunteers in hot water. How hot? 103.5 Fahrenheit. So it's nice and hot, that water. It's not burning you, but it is nice and hot. And what they did, they show that the high heat, that artificial fever, activates the different cells of your immune system. In fact, this is a fascinating study. Notice the name of the study. How hyperthermia, putting somebody in hot water, enhances, what is this word? The interference, the synthesis of interference. And look at the graphical results of the study. We said that when the interferon levels are nice and high, what do we said? You decrease the risk of going into severe coronavirus. Please notice here, when they tested the different temperatures of the water that stimulate the most the interference is water at temperature of 39 Celsius or 1.3.5 Fahrenheit. When you are in that type of water, and as your body temperature increases, you create an artificial fever. Notice how the level of interferon just explodes at this level. Okay. See, this is one of the benefits that we're talking about in the morning. Remember with the Finnish people? See, by going into that sauna, those Finnish people are experiencing exactly this benefit regarding their interference. This is the article that I wrote. You also find it there on that ResearchGate page, showing how hydrotherapy is an excellent strategy to prevent and treat COVID-19. So there's two studies that we did. This one is the theoretical one, showing the theory, why this works. And then we were working on a second paper. We had patients that had COVID-19, and we gave them hydrotherapy. And then we took blood samples from them and trying to show, the effect that this was having on the immunity, on the interference, and so forth. And the results were fantastic. Every single one of those patients that were receiving the hydrotherapy, they all recover quite fast. None of them complicated into severe disease. So as I mentioned to you, in Finland, the sauna is something very cultural. In fact, every home there has a sauna. It's just the way that things work. As you have a kitchen or I don't know what other part of your home, they have a sauna. It's something very, very cultural in Finland. In fact, they even have one at the parliament. One time they signed a peace agreement with Russia, with their neighbors, and the agreement was finalized in the sauna. So the parliamentarians, were sweating there inside the sauna and reading the final document and so forth. That's where they actually, signed the agreement. That's how cultural this, sauna is. And let me try to see if we can do this. Yeah. So this is my family and I when we went to Finland. You can see there's snow in the ground. It was in December. And you can see there my daughter. That lake is close to freezing. And there's my other daughter. We just got out of the sauna there. Look at that. And there is my wife. And that's me. So as you can see, you don't die. I'm not alive, okay? Now, if you have a problem with a heart or something, please don't do this. You're not going to get out of that water. But for the Finnish people, this is like the most fantastic thing that you can do. Okay, they're like look forward to do this type of things at the end of their day, and they've been doing this for thousands of years. And the Finnish people are people that are very intellectual. There's a lot of universities and schools and things in Finland. So they have studied the sauna baths with so many published studies, documenting every single detail about it. And what they found out, the only thing you need to be very careful with is alcohol. Alcohol and saunas don't mix very well, okay? Because the alcohol interferes with the way that the body handles the heat. So your body gets confused and is not able to respond correctly, and you're high risk of having, some sort of heat stroke or something in the sauna if you are drinking alcohol. But when you go to Finland, you see from the little children to the elderly people doing that sauna bath. In fact, I was talking to Pastor Mark Finley recently, and he told me that that's one of his secrets, okay? That he built a sauna in his home, and that multiple times per week he goes and uses that sauna. Okay, so a little hint there, and a nice project that you can do at home to, consider that. Now, if you don't have a sauna, which is a majority of us, isn't it? We're not in a Finnish area. What you can do other forms of hydrotherapy. And one of the simplest is using contrast showers. And that's something you can do at home. What you do, you go in the shower, you open the shower when it's nice and hot enough to be hot, but not to be burning. It's not about burning, okay? And you want to put that water, especially on your shoulders. You want to go around, and you do that from 3 to 5 minutes, and then you do the contrast. Stop the hot water, put the cold water, 30 seconds to 1 minute. Now you need to use common sense. The younger and healthier you are, the more the contrast you can do. The elderly or more young you are, you shouldn't be putting, that much of the contrast side of things. So in that way, you're able to raise the temperature and get the benefits. In the book, I talk in a couple of chapters about that. But I remember when I was in medical school, my teacher was talking about immunity, and he was talking about the wonders that happens when somebody gets a fever. There's a reason why your body gets a fever. Because metabolism increases, your body is able to kill much more germs, much faster. Disease actually decreases the progression of disease, and all these wonderful things. So I raised my hand. Professor, if fever is so good, how come we cut it off in the hospital? Well, I got him a little bit off, I got him a little bit off, and he kind of stumbled on his answer, and he said, well, I guess it's tradition, he said. Okay, so you need to learn to work with the fever and not against the fever. I'm not, against stopping the fever if it's too high. Of course, you have to stop the fever, if the fever starts getting way too high. In the book, I even have a little chart there, to show you when things are a little bit too high, you better go and do something about it. But you need to learn to work with that fever and not against that fever. So another thing you can do for your immunity, for hydrotherapy, is using your microwave. And what you do a hot fermentation. It's something simple to do. So what you do, you have a cloth, an old piece of cloth, and you put it on water, you wring it well, you put that wet cloth on a plastic bag, you make a knot on the plastic bag, and then you put it on the microwave. Every microwave is different. Some will require 3 minutes, some 5, some 8. You need to play a little bit with your microwave. And then the bag is going to inflate as the microwaves are heating that liquid. That will make the bag go big and big and big. And then when it's nice and big, you break that plastic bag. Be careful because steam is going to come out so you don't get burned. And then you take that cloth and you put it over another towel, and then you apply it. If it's too hot, add another layer. And in that way, you're able to transmit that heat. That you can use not only for, to heat your body, but also whenever you feel like, tire some muscle and so forth. You can put one of those hot fomentations, and they have a nice, relaxing, beneficial effect on them. So as you can see, these are practical things that you can do for your immunity. And notice this very interesting study. This study was done in the time of the Spanish flu. And what this scientist did, he started tabulating the cases at the Army hospital that complicated into a pneumonia and how many of them actually died. And as you can see, at the Army hospital, which was one of the best treatments that you could get for the Spanish flu, still many people were getting the pneumonia and many people were dying. And he compared that against the sanitariums, the lifestyle institutions that were back then. And notice how in the Adventist sanitariums, where they were applying the plant-based diet, where they were applying the hydrotherapy, notice how the number of pneumonia cases was way low compared to those that were happening at the Army hospital. And even the mortality, notice how much less people were dying at the Adventist institutions compared to the U.S. Army. So you can see the positive effect that even back then, the knowledge that God had given this church had on the people. And no wonder why in the book of, the fourth book of Moses, it says the life of the flesh is where? In the blood. So by manipulating that, we're able to get that benefit. And remember to complement things with a good, wholesome, plant-based diet. You've probably seen the study I quoted there on my book, how a plant-based diet decreased the risk of severe disease by 68%. And notice this very interesting study. Nitric oxide inhibits the replication of severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus. So nitric oxide decreases the multiplication of coronavirus. And where do you get nitric oxide? You get it from vegetables that are rich in nitrates. Examples, here's a list: celery, lettuce, beetroot, spinach, arugula. All those nice leafy green vegetables are loaded with those positive nitric oxide. And also, spending time in nature reduces stress. This is my study, and in this study, we were trying to determine what has the most positive effect regarding relaxation. And it was fascinating. What we found out is that Bible study and prayer are one of the best things you can do to decrease your levels of stress. That's something you can do at home, isn't it? That's something that is free. Okay, you just need your Bible. And make sure that you participate of these types of activities because they have a positive effect. By lowering the levels of stress, you improve immunity. So as you can see, what we have learned today is that vitamin D levels are important. We need to make sure our vitamin Ds are nice and normal. We also learn that things like essential oils have a positive effect on our immunity. We also learn that sleep, and especially sleep before midnight, are excellent ways of stimulating our immune system. And finally, we learn that hydrotherapy has a positive effect on our immunity. So as you can see, there are things we can do to improve our immunity, increase those interference, activate that innate immune system. And as you can see, it's not about just one thing, but it is the synergistic effect of multiple things. That's the way that we can help multiple conditions. So may God bless you. May you be able to apply these interventions. And I don't know what else you guys have in the program. Time is yours. Sure, we can take a few questions from the audience.
So, quick question. For the hot and cold, when you do the 3 to 5 minutes of hot and then 30 seconds to a minute, how often, for how long, like how many times do you do?
That's right. You can do that a couple of times a week, or you can even do it every day. It's okay. Okay? If you do it too long, the problem is you start getting tired. So let's say that you want to do 3 changes like that. You start getting tired. You will see what I'm talking about. So you need to make sure that you time things well. You don't want to start, your day with a lot of those contrasts, because then you're going to feel tired throughout the day. And they're going to say, hey, this stuff doesn't work, and blah, blah, blah. Well, because the heat makes you tired. So that's why if it's in the morning, just one of those series, that's more than enough. And if you want to do it, in the evening when you come back, then, that's going to make you nice and tired and ready to go to bed. Okay, so watch out with the timing.
Sorry, I didn't ask my question correctly. How many sets of those 2?
That's right. Okay, so if it's for the morning, just one. Okay. So just 3 to 5 minutes, and then the cold, and that's it. If you do multiple cycles, 2, 3, 4, then you start getting tired. And so yeah, watch out with the timing when you apply it.
You mentioned about vitamins. Now I know the best vitamins is in the things you eat.
That's right.
But is it possible that the vitamins you're taking in bottles and stuff?
Yes.
Could they be just worthless, or could they be
Good
harmful?
question. That's a very good question. See, there's many people in the internet that are going to try to sell you all kinds of pills. It's actually a very good business. And many of those vitamins, you actually don't need them. So the people that try to sell you those pills are going to use the excuse that the soil is getting depleted. And that's why you need to buy their pills, because their pills are fine, but the soil is depleted, and blah, blah. Well, let me tell you, this is something like the plants are like the humans. See, a human that has a deficiency is going to get sick. A plant that has a deficiency is going to get sick. If you don't correct that deficiency, the human may get so severely sick that die. The same thing happens with the plants. If a plant, you don't correct their deficiency, it's going to die, the plant. So the fact that you're seeing a vegetable, a fruit out of there, tells us that there is enough nutrition. If not, you wouldn't see that. The plant would be sick and wouldn't give us its fruits. So you need to watch out, We sometimes obsess too much about deficiencies, but our problem is actually excesses. We live in a land of excess. Everything is in excess. So I would watch out regarding vitamin D, as we talked about, and vitamin B12. Make sure also your vitamin B12 is nice and normal, and especially if you're following a plant-based diet, just ask your doctor to check your vitamin B12 to see if your current strategy for B12 supplementation is going well. Other than those two, the majority of them, you can get them on a plant-based diet. And there's some other deficiencies. I'm not discounting them, but usually we need to demonstrate that in a laboratory that something is missing. Then we would consider taking, some other supplementations. So make sure that you're eating a good, balanced, whole food, plant-based diet. There's a nice guide that Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine put out. If you want to find it, just put 21 days vegetarian, P as in Paul, C as in Charles, R as in Rose, M as in Mary, PCRM. It's an organization in Washington that put this out to free, and you can sign up, and for 21 days it's going to tell you all the things you need to be eating and so forth. Nice free guide. There's even videos and all kinds of things that you can watch together with that, and they won't sell you absolutely anything. It's free. Okay, just find it and follow it if you want to give it a try. Okay. Anybody else? Any other questions? Yes. 21 days PCRM. Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. Dr. Neil Barnard. I'm actually co-author with him in a nutrition book called Rethink Food. Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yes.
I understood that you had made this at camp meeting.
Yes.
And in one of your daily seminars, I thought I heard you say that once you get the coronavirus, you cannot get it again. Does that mean the
Well, the problem is that that's right. The problem is that there's many variations of it. If we just had one coronavirus, then that would apply. But the problem are the variations. So you may get the Delta version, and then the thing flips to something else. Then you can get it, but the studies show that your likelihood of ending up with a very severe type of coronavirus, if you already had it once, you actually decrease the risk of getting the more severe version the next time. So it is possible because of the variations, okay? So it's very less likely if it's the same variant that you're gonna get again.
I just wanted to say that the hydrotherapy, what you were talking about, putting it in the microwave and taking
Yes.
it out, that works. When Dean had coronavirus and I put that on his back, that made, and he would be prone, he would be lying
Yes.
prone. And I put that on his back, I'm telling you, it worked. And everybody that I know that has coronavirus, I have a whole list that I send them, and that is on my list.
That's right.
I'm a big, big believer in that. And also vitamin D, fresh air, make sure you do walks, deep breathing. The list is, like I said, when we went to the doctors, when he had it in 2020, they sent us home to die. They didn't give us any strategies, and I reached out to my natural friends, and they told me all these things that you're saying, doctor. And I appreciate you coming here and telling everyone this.
Thank you. Yes.
In the Netherlands, you talked about they use a lot of sauna.
Finland, yes. Go ahead.
Do they also include eucalyptus in the rooms?
Good question. And the answer is yes. So they like to add a few of those drops of eucalyptus. And another thing they do, they have these branches of the Bjork tree. That's how you call it here. Bjork, thank you. Birch. I'm translating from Norwegian. And they hit themselves in the back with this thing. You know, it's just something cultural that they do while they take the sauna bath. But yes, you know, they add that a few drops and the whole room there, you know, it smells nice and eucalyptus. So yeah, something also to learn from this Finnish people.
I just wanted to mention that when we did the sauna, and anytime you do like a sauna or if you're like in a hot tub, it's important to keep your head cold. So we usually, I mean, it's good to raise your body temperature, but not your brain temperature. So you keep your head cold. You can put it on your head or your neck.
And by the way, we did that 3 times. So we jumped in and then came back to the sauna and then jumped in again and then go back and then jumped in again. So 3 times we jumped in that occasion to the cold lake there of Finland. It was very nice actually. It actually feels good if you're nice and warm. If you're, you know, lukewarm, Laodicean, you jump into that water, man, that's not going to feel good, you know. But when you're nice and hot, that contrast it felt so good, you know. It was so energizing, you know, to do that. So the family that we were staying there in Finland, the men there heat up the room and everything. This was a wood-heated sauna, you know, just for us, so that we could experience that jump there into the lake.
You mentioned about not doing anything to cut down a fever. When should you start to cut it down?
That's right. In the book, I'm talking about that. There's a nice chart there. But we start to get worried when the temperature is too high. Okay, if the temperature is starting to get too high, you wanna do something about cutting down that fever, 105, 106, and so forth. You start getting worried about it, and you don't want that. Also, children that have history of seizures, you know, you don't want those children to be, you know, having fevers and so forth. Those need to be closely monitored and do something about them. So yeah, watch out, you know, make sure that you work with the fever, not against the fever.
So when it comes to hydrotherapy, what about people who have like lung issues? Like I'm asthmatic and
That's right.
heat is not good.
That's
and
right.
neither is extreme cold. So what do you recommend, I mean, in that kind of situation?
That's right. Yeah. So people that have, you know, history of hypersensitive lungs that can go, you know, into an asthmatic and attack and so forth, you start knowing yourself very well. You know very well if it's steam, if it's cold, heat, whatever it is, you want to try to avoid it, no question about it. So I would try to do more like fomentations or things like that instead of things that are you're breathing, rather more localized heat. That would be the best thing you can do. And also something else you can try, the thermophore. You know, those thermophores are actually excellent. I don't know if you're familiar with the thermophores, those things that you connect to the electricity and they heat up. It's like a heating pad, that's right. You know, so it's some Adventist company that started this thermophore company a while ago, and that's something that is a nice investment, you know, to have at home one of these thermophores. So yeah, you know, I would try more, you know, the local heat rather than the inhaled one.
What's the best thing to do to bring a temperature down?
Good question. One thing you can do, you can use tepid water, not cold water, but tepid water. Okay, so if you have access to a bathtub, you put the water, not cold, but tepid, and then you put the person there. That tends to lower the temperature nicely down. If it's not working, you need to take medication, no question about it. I'm not against medication, but that's something that you can try, that tepid water, okay, to lower the temperature. That's right, and that feels very icy. When somebody has a fever and you put temperature like that, yep, you feel cold, nice and cold. Any other questions?
You had mentioned something this morning just about with the increase of diseases in the world.
That's right.
You were mentioning that we're expecting another pandemic maybe.
That's right.
that has to do with influenza. Is that like something that based on what you've seen in the past that's coming like down the pike, or like how do we know?
Yeah, so how do I know that? That is where most of the major organizations, from the World Health Organization and so forth, this is something that the models are pointing on towards. There has been beginnings of this, but as I mentioned to you, remember the Vegas thing, the 777, we haven't had the right mutation. So there have been some scares off, in China, in Hong Kong, in Malaysia, and so forth. So we know that one is coming because of the way that we are treating the animals. There's no question about it. It can be an pure avian flu, or it can be a swine flu, or it can be a combination of both. Especially when you have the pigs and the chickens, the virus mutates here, jumps into here, mutates here, jumps into here. And man, one of these days we're going to have the right mutation. And there's multiple published studies about it also. This is not just, some conspiracy guy there on the website. This is something that we understand by the way the number of animals and so forth. For example, there's some farms that have more than 1 million chickens in one place. I mean, think about it. This is not gonna end up very pretty. We think that it's like the old days, the chickens running there in the sunlight and so forth. It's not like that anymore. The way that they're doing this factory farming, that's the term, is just not right. And we're going to get ourselves in pretty big trouble, Sadly, other countries actually have banned the procedure, but we're still doing it here, And this is not going to end up pretty, So, yeah, that's the way that things are at. The specialists on emerging diseases, are predicting this type of thing. And sadly, in the world that we live, we expect to have that new pandemic sometime in the future.
I feel that I have a pretty good immune system.
Very good.
Cold, nothing like that. I'm 92 years old. My question is, and I got the shots. Some people and some Adventists think, well, they got a good immune system, they don't need the shots. Could there be that the shots actually hurt your immune system?
Good question. Good complex question. Okay, so for the disclaimer, I'm not against the shots. Okay, I think that they do have their role. Something that is disappointing us is that we were expecting the shots to stop the problem, and it is not stopping the problem. Okay, people still. There was a Lancet study. You can go to my Twitter. I put it there a couple of months ago, that showed that you are as likely to transmit the virus to others if you have the vaccination and you don't have the vaccination. Okay, which actually was the part of the excuse of why everybody should be having it and so forth. So the shot does have an important role, and especially vulnerable populations. okay? People with multiple comorbidities, people that are quite elderly and so forth, they do get some benefit, from that. By the fact that the benefit is that you're decreasing the risk of severe disease. That's what worries us in that population, that they're vulnerable population, possibility of having severe disease and dying, because of that. Now, will the shot have a negative effect on the immunity? That's not necessarily what the studies are showing us, okay? As any medication, you name the medication and it has side effects. This is just the way that medicine works. So as a physician, what you do, you make an evaluation. Am I going to get more risk of side effects or am I going to get more benefits? So you need to make that decision based on that. Am I going to get more benefit out of it, or am I putting the person in more risk for side effect? So no question about it, the vaccinations do have some risk associated with them, and that's why you need to have that conversation with your physician, and the physician needs to evaluate that, your whole situation, and make that decision. Is that person going to get more benefit out of that, or is that person going to get more risk out of it? So yeah, that's the way that it works regarding the shot.
Just had a question regarding what gives you a better fighting chance from your research? Would you say the shots or the antiviral and the monoclonal body treatments afterwards?
That's right. That's a good question, and that depends on many different factors. Those monoclonal ones are actually excellent tools. They even got themselves into politics and all kinds of things, sadly, which I happen to disagree, because I think that those things really save lives. And when you apply them early on, the body is able to avoid the going into this severe disease, So especially the people that are very vulnerable, the monoclonal antibodies are excellent, for them to avoid the severe type of disease. And at the same time, the shot does help the vulnerable populations, I've had the conversation with people that were very high risk for severe disease, and I told them, when they came to me and talked and asked for my opinion, I told them you should definitely consider, making that decision towards the shot, and they didn't do it, and they end up with very severe disease and so forth. Some of them are almost about to die. So I'm against forcing people. I think that everybody should be free to make their own, health decision. But at the same time, make sure that you make a good decision. Ask for God for wisdom, and God is going to show you what's the best decision, for your health.
If I may add, I think the answer to your question is that we just don't know yet.
It's a complex question.
Yeah, we're still waiting for information. And as time goes by, we'll have better data to say whether the vaccines were more protective or whether monoclonal antibodies were more protective. We just don't know yet. Were there any other questions from the audience? All right. I do want to thank our speaker, Dr. Eddie Ramirez, for coming.
Thank you.
We really appreciate the information that you were able to share.
Thank you.
And we do have copies of his books, Pandemic Busters, at the back. So anyone who did not receive a copy, you can take a copy as you leave. I also presented on the monoclonal antibodies. I know it was a very fast presentation this morning. So did anybody have questions about that I can answer for you? All right, if not, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I did have a question. I'm sorry, I just thought of it when you were closing. So if you're talking about plant-based, beans, legumes, things like that, I know there's a whole thing about GMO and non-GMO. Is it better? I'm sure it's probably better to, grow your own, but if you can't, how serious is it that you either labeled organic or non-GMO or?
It's a complex question, but let me answer it very simply. People sometimes make too much scandal about these things. You know, if somebody that doesn't eat enough fruits and vegetables, I don't care if it's GMO, they will benefit from eating more. Okay? So the research is kind of nebulous, you know. It's not like it's definite, GMO is bad for you, you should never eat that. That's not what the research is showing. If not, they would ban them tomorrow. Okay? So there's certain standards that they need to, pass and so forth. If it personally bothers you, well, just try to start making that switch, and eat less of those GMOs and more towards the organic things. What I would suggest you do, be informed about what they're called the dirty dozen. The dirty dozen are the fruits and vegetables that happen to have a higher loads of fertilizers and insecticides and things. In my book, I talk about it. So search it there in the book. And you find those that are more prone to have higher levels and try to decrease them in your diet and try to choose more the organic version of it if that's something that is bothering you. But most people benefit from increasing the numbers of fruits and veggies. It's a big problem. There's many people that don't eat enough fruits and vegetables. This is a big problem, and we need to be encouraging them, to eat them as they're going to get all those benefits.
All right, if there are no other questions, Dr. Ramirez, would you kindly pray for us to dismiss?
Yes, let us pray. Our Father, we want to take good care of our health, and we want to make the best decisions for your honor and glory. And we just ask you, Lord, for wisdom. We ask you for your Holy Spirit in each one of our lives. Protect us, guide us, and help us, Lord, to make these decisions for your honor and glory. Give us health so we can continue fulfilling the mission that you have in York. And we continue to pray for this church that you may continue to nurture it and may continue to grow and be a blessing in this community. In the name of Jesus, amen.
Amen.